Hello and welcome to the Ocean Impact Podcast, Pitchfest 2020 series. I'm Nick Chiarelli, thanks for joining me. Late last year, OIO ran the Ocean Impact Pitchfest 2020. We were inundated with almost 200 applications from 38 countries and were blown away by the incredible breadth and quality of ideas and ventures that applied, all trying to make a positive impact on planet Ocean. Over the course of this Pitchfest 2020 series, we'll dive into the challenge and opportunity areas that each of the finalists are working on, find out about their unique solution, and discuss the key challenges and learnings they've encountered on their journey so far. We'll also discuss their why, their motivation for working towards a healthy ocean, what the road ahead looks like for them, and how you, the listener, might be able to support their journey. This week, I'm talking to Fanny Sauvignon, who's the Business Development Manager of the South Korean startup Ingine. Ingine's mission is to harness wave power to supply clean, sustainable and affordable energy to remote island and coastal communities. Offshore renewable energy is regarded as a major challenge due to the violent and unpredictable characteristics of the open ocean. But Ingine use a novel approach to creating ocean energy through a system that remains attached to land. Ingine's wave energy converter technology generates power using the whole range of wave movements, enabling its application even in shallow waters where conventional technologies otherwise have difficulties. Ingine's target customers range from off-grid communities in remote islands to city dwellers of coastal towns. Ingine installations contribute to energy security and independence, fossil fuel pollution reduction, and boost local economic development. I hope you enjoyed this discussion with Fanny Sauvignon on the Ocean Impact Podcast Pitchfest 2020 series.
Can't take the ocean out of me.
Welcome, Fanny, to the Ocean Impact Podcast. It's great to have you on this morning.
Hi, Nick. It's nice to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. So you're calling in from South Korea. What time is it where you are?
It's 9:34 in the morning, so everybody just clocked in.
It's not too bad. So it's not a bad time zone. A lot of the other guests from the other Pitchfest finalists have been on the other side of the world. So been doing some early mornings and late nights for me. So it's nice to do one in the middle of the day. Let's get straight into it. I'm intrigued as to what Ingine translates to in English. What's the name all about?
Oh, then Ingine is the combination of two syllables. So you have in, which is the traditional, I would say, sign for a human being, a person in Korean or Sino-Korean. And Jin comes from engineering. So it's basically engineering designed for human beings.
Awesome. Engineering to benefit humans. That's great.
Correct. Right. That's a nice meaning, in my opinion. Right.
So, look, let's get straight into it. What is the problem and the opportunity that Ingine's pursuing here?
I would say the problem is quite obvious to everyone. You've got this climate emergency and at the same time, a growing demand in the world for electricity. And also the fact that there is increasing land pressure and pressure on land resources. So as many of our co-competitors, we look to the oceans for solutions. And the solution to us is wave energy, which is a dense, predictable, and abundant source of energy. Ingine is developing wave energy, converting technology in order to support the renewable energy transition. And yes, so wave energy is a very efficient, dense, predictable, and abundant source of power, which could provide up to 30% of the world energy demand. So it's not as marginal as some could think.
it's a fascinating space, isn't it? I mean, to give you some context, you're and as you know, you're the second of two wave energy finalists. So 2 out of 12 of the Pitchfest 2020 finalists were wave energy, and even more similar, both of you targeting similar small island developing countries and local energy production. So we were actually blown away by the number of wave energy entrants in the Pitchfest. We must have had 15 or 20 entrants from all around the world, and we were completely not expecting that. It is, and I think I mentioned this in a previous interview with Tom Dennis from Waveswell Energy. It is sort of the little brother to the other renewables, which I think is, makes it exciting. Now there is so much potential for it, and it also, if we can get the technology right, it has a lot of benefits that solar and wind don't have. And it's a very exciting space. I mentioned Waveswell there. Can you tell us anything? Tell us a little bit about the actual Ingine technology and how that looks in relation to who you deem your competitors are.
Sure. So first off, actually, we are very happy to see that there is such a emulation around wave energy technology, because for now we're focused on increasing awareness about this source of energy and its potential, both commercial and as a source of energy supply. So Ingine's technology, the InWave, is an onshore type multi-directional wave energy converter. So let's unpack that. The onshore part is because our power generation unit is actually located on land, say from the elements, and the wave energy collecting unit is about 100 meters away from shore. It's a sort of buoy, right? A floating unit, and it collects the energy from waves coming from all directions. So that's the multi-directional part. And then it mechanically transfers that energy to land through the ropes. So through the movement of the ropes, they're going to generate energy on the land unit. And so for the people who know about the different types of wave energy technology, we basically have an optimized point absorber WEC, except most point absorbers go up and down, and ours moves with all the movements of coastal waves. So I would say a lot of our competitors are a bit more offshore based, so they have to rely on submarine cables, which can prove very expensive. And one of our engineers' goals was to avoid that underwater cabling and electricity, and all of that is on the land side.
So your value proposition against some of those competitors is lower cost. Being closer to land means that you can you're not out in the elements of the ocean as much. So probably easier, cheaper to maintain, less chance of breakage, lower cost to get going because you're smaller units generating likely less power, but with the target sites being local facilities and small islands, that works well.
Yes, you said it. So basically to reduce those capital expenditures and reduce the difficulty of maintenance, so we don't need any ship going offshore or anything like that. And that allows for smaller install capacity and decentralized distribution. And as you said, then we can reach the remote coastal areas and islands markets because they don't all necessarily need a multi-megawatt installation. sometimes they need, I don't know, even 100 kilowatt, and you need to deliver that in a cost-effective way. And that's what we are getting at. But since we have a modular approach, meaning that we can install any number of these modules, provided that we have a coastal site, then we can also actually go up to multi-megawatts. I'm saying that for the future.
Sure. And I mean, it's an enormous problem, isn't it, with all of the small island developing countries in the world, the problem of diesel pollution. So we have to transport that diesel to these small islands. That's expensive. It's time consuming. It burns more fuel in the process of doing it, which is not great. Either. And then, of course, there's the problem of burning the diesel on the islands to generate power, and that supply can be, you're at the behest of getting diesel there on time. There's, you can run into periods where there's supply issues, and that means no power. So to have a local source of electricity that's clean is really attractive, and enables these small islands to become much more self-sufficient.
Self-sufficiency, energy independence are keywords that we hear a lot from local communities.
Energy independence and obviously cleaning up the diesel pollution so they'd be the two major reasons that people are reaching out to you.
Right.
Sure. Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, just tell me, we talked a little bit about how the wave energy converter works. Just give the listeners a little bit of an idea of what it looks like.
What it looks like, so imagine a sort of buoy floating atop the waves, about 100 meters away from shore. The color depends on the regulations, I'm sorry to say, because it has to be safe for boats not to come closer, etc. And then on shore, you've got a sort of, it can look like a rectangle, the power generation unit, but in reality, it is often designed with local regulations and local taste in mind. We actually have an in-house architect that makes sure of that. So if there are local materials that are known to resist to the local weather, if we consult with the local population and they give us an opinion on what it should look like, then it's something we can work on within the limits of the technology.
Sure. So, Fanny, tell us a little bit about the founders of Ingine and their motivation for starting the company, developing the technology. I'm also interested in hearing your motivation to be working for Ingine. You've got quite an interesting story yourself, a French girl working for a South Korean company, a startup, wave technology startup. I mean, I'm sure there must be a backstory to why you're there and why you're so passionate as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so I'm going to start with my CEO, Daniel. So it's like you said, it's a South Korean company. There are a few foreigners. I'd say we're about 20% of the company, which is not a small number, but I was the first foreigner. But the technology is Korean and Daniel is Korean. So I think Daniel is really passionate about renewable energy. And in the early 2000s, he joined a major Korean oil conglomerate at the time, SK Energy. And he really wanted to develop a clean energy systems in general. But at the time, there was no such thing as a grid parity, meaning that renewables were still considered too expensive to become mainstream. So fast forward to 2008 with oil prices peaking, and in the next years, the global recession that even I remember, although I am much younger. So the prices were going to stay high for as long as one could forecast. And Daniel started wondering himself, so when is this grid parity gonna come? And the only place at the time where grid parity was a thing were actually islands. And then he became more passionate about the case of islands, and he personally, so it wasn't even in the scope of his job, but he went on a personal quest to discover which energy source is the best to supply islands. And he came up with wave energy. And he went on his own, and in 2010, 2011, he decided to create Ingine so that he could develop such a technology the way he wanted to, without the pressure of a big company. And right, that's when the InWave was first thought and development started.
I love it. So he went looking for or realized there was a problem, went on a bit of a mission searching and fact-finding himself to sort of get to the heart of that problem and identify the opportunity. And he just decided, okay, well, I'm going to start a wave generating company, and we'll develop this fantastic technology and solve this problem. Awesome. And he's an engineer. Is his background engineering?
Yes, so he's an engineer, and then he came to take on business roles at his former company. But even then, he thought he wasn't at the decision-making level. So that's, I guess, the story of some entrepreneurs. They see they don't have enough space to develop their ideas, so they just branched out on their own. I believe that's Daniel's way of doing things.
Yeah, I think that attracts a lot of people into the early stage space. It's certainly something that I find attractive about working in and around startups is, the ability to have context for the entire organization rather than working in a big corporate and having a small role somewhere that you most days you even struggle to see how that fits into the bigger picture. Context it can really get you motivated when you can see how everything comes together and how what you're doing, directly contributes to that sort of top line strategy. It's an exciting space to be in, and good on him. And I'm glad he did go on that expedition. And so that was in 2012. Here we are now, almost 8 years later, or 2011. Okay, even more. So 9 years. I mean, because let's face it, you don't develop wave harnessing technology in a hurry, do you? It's not a quick process. Yep. Tell us a little bit about what's happened in the last 9 years. Where's the company been to get to today?
It's been, I joined 2 years ago, but it's been a ride. So actually 9 years can seem like a lot to other sectors, but for this kind of technology, it's not so bad. So there were lab scale tests until about 2014. And then they really wanted to see a real C proof of concept, which was the key to getting us to pre-commercial level. So then with some help from the Ministry of Industry in Korea, and the rest of it funded by ourselves, Ingine started building the demonstration plant in Jeju Island, to full scale, so 1-1. To get that proof of real C, and it was commissioned, I think, very late 2016, and it's still actually working and connected to the grid in Jeju Island. So it's been really useful to test the technology in real C and see that it's working and get results, and then optimize some parts of the system based on this constant demonstration. Some international partners have also visited and are always welcome to visit when it's safe to travel again. I would say the only thing about this demonstration plant is that In summer, the waves in Jeju Island are not really strong for most wave energy technologies. So it's working the rest of the year. And it's a sort of playground for our engineers and a way to stay in touch with how the technology reacts to everything, to the waves, to the elements, including tsunamis.
Wow. So you're constantly learning. It is a project site. You're constantly learning, and I assume you also have pre-COVID you would have had interested parties in the technology coming to have a look at it and seeing seeing it firsthand and seeing how suitable it might be for where they're based.
Yes, absolutely, and it's a nice place, Jeju Island. So.
Is that where you're based? Where are you based?
We're based in Seoul for many reasons, just because, it's the capital city and it's not so far. But then Jeju Island is just an hour away by plane from Seoul. And it has an international airport. So it's quite accessible, at least in normal times.
And do you find yourself making trips to Jeju Island very often?
I've been quite a bit, right? Because then it's sort of a rite of passage for Ingine employees, because you have to experience the technology for yourself. You're not just sitting in an office in Seoul and developing projects. So you go there, you eat local food, you have a local partner taking you around, and there's a lot of sea-based activities in Jeju. That's also the home of the famous divers, the women who dive for, I forgot the name of the particular type of seafood, but they're quite famous throughout the world.
Awesome. We moved on to
Sure.
our last question before we got to hear about your why. How do you find yourself at Ingine, and what is it that excites you about working with this technology and working in wave energy?
Right. So you mentioned the challenge of developing such an energy source with a large potential. So I'm a graduate of business and international cooperation, and I think I can find all of those elements working at Ingine, because sure, there's the business part, that's clear, but also the amount of different stakeholders that you have to coordinate to develop wave energy project is very diverse, because of course the public sector is interested, and you've got investors, but of the private sector, but you also have international organizations, major climate finance institutions. You have also to deal with environmental authorities. In some countries, with also with defense authorities, because the sea and island territories can be actually sensitive areas. So there's the challenge of making all of that come together. And it's a challenge, but that's the exciting part about it, that I personally really enjoy. And of course, finding meaning in your mission, which is to provide people with clean and sustainable renewable energy.
Yeah, awesome. It's my mind actually it's an enormous role for you, really, isn't it? I mean, I mean, you speak 2 or 3 languages. You're not operating in your home country. It's a new space. You're trying to break into multiple markets with all sorts of regulatory and cultural issues. My head spins thinking about how you handle the day-to-day of going about your job. So good luck is with it, and I can it's fantastic that you're taking that on. It's inspiring.
Thank you.
You mentioned you touched a moment ago on some of the challenges, and we mentioned regulations and cultural issues. Maybe take a moment to tell us about the markets that you're currently working in and some of your priority areas, and to touch on some of those challenges because it's not the same everywhere where you're working. There's that mix of public-private input into selling power of any variety, and then the cultural and local economics. It's a complex mix.
Right. So although the world is our goal, because by definition, islands and remote coastal areas are scattered throughout the world, we do have to have some focus areas if we want to get ahead and really deploy that technology. So I would say on the short term for wave energy, the wave energy sector, I would say the next 2 years or so, our focus will be that deployment in mostly Southeast Asia and France, Europe, the Atlantic facade of Europe. Right, and in Southeast Asia, in particular, Vietnam, we're going to have a plant there by the end of 2021, and on the island of An Binh, east of Vietnam. And we've established a subsidiary in Vietnam last summer to that effect, because it considerably eases things in terms of regulation. So I have some Vietnamese colleagues working on that at Ingine. And as for France, we also, I believe, going to have a food in the country. We're trying to establish a subsidiary because we want to expand our R&D capabilities, all while expanding to Europe, especially given that there's a lot of things happening as regards to the ocean energy in France. So in order to co-benefit from this stimulating environment, we have to be there. So it's true that we're trying to surround ourselves with an ecosystem, which is why actually we're the reason we participated in the Ocean Impact Pitchfest at first is we heard about it because we're connected to that Australian ecosystem as well, because we're members of the Australia Ocean Energy Group, and it's been a wonderful source of communication with our sector.
Yeah, Stephanie Thornton at the Australian Ocean Energy Group is doing some great work there, and it's fantastic seeing the space develop. Tell us a little bit about your business model. From what I understand, you essentially sell the hardware to a third party on the ground at a site, and then beyond that, you work with them to get the wave energy converter up and running, and work according to local regulations and all of the nuances in that particular location to ultimately get it hooked up to a grid.
Right, that's the simplified version of it. So clearly most of our revenues would come from equipment sales, but we do get involved right from project development, and we get involved in the commissioning part of it. And as I've told you before, there's a part of transferring the operations and maintenance skills to local technicians. It's something that we've planned to do in many project locations. Right, so it's not just it's the equipment sales for the pure business model, but in reality, we get very involved in the projects.
Yeah, and you really, it's essential that you get those people on the ground and you work closely with those with locals. Otherwise, it's an enormous task for you to try and take on the world and get multiple installations where you run every facet of that. I mean, it's just an impossible task even for a well-resourced company, let alone a startup. So it sounds completely sensible to me. So challenges around local challenges are always interesting. You're entering Vietnam and France to start off with. At the moment, what does the next couple of years look like? Are you targeting different regions? Is there growth in the regions you're targeting? What are your key priorities over the next 12 to 24 months?
Okay, so if we're thinking 12 to 24 months, then for us, that's actually quite a short timeline, which is why I mentioned Vietnam and France in priority. But the truth is we are developing projects firstly elsewhere in Asia. I would mention Indonesia and Sri Lanka, for example. And there are a couple other locations in the world that maybe not as that I may not disclose right now, but we're completely open to any conversation with anyone who's interested, and they can reach us on the website or on LinkedIn or anywhere really. But there's something that we have to take into consideration is first we have to go to the markets where wave energy prices can be competitive, which is for the most part, for the moment, islands, with that role of diesel replacements. But there are some partners who are interested, who have coastal sites or who own ports that are interested in developing wave energy. And then we're working on a coastal site, for example, in Morocco. So with that, so I would say it's difficult to give an exact date, but if you think about 2025 to 2027, then sometime during those years, we're going to pass the bar of 100 megawatt install capacity. And thanks to that increased cumulative capacity and increased efficiency, then the cost of electricity is supposed to gradually decrease. And then we can think on going in more places in the world where that becomes interesting in terms of cost and prices.
Yeah, excellent. Tell us about your fundraising ambitions, next stages for the company growth. I believe you're talking about an IPO, or you have your sights set on an IPO.
Right, and actually, it's a decision to launch the IPO around 2022, 2023. So we are already working within the company. We're working with a dedicated consultant and company to prepare ourselves for this IPO. Because that would be on the Korean Trading Board, KOSDAQ. So we want to achieve that visibility, provide more exit options for potential investors, and that will be key to our commercialization process.
So the timing of that 2022, 2023 would be to essentially take what you've done to date and list, mm-hmm. And I assume you would do a capital raise at the same time, mm-hmm. and that would be growth capital to scale the team. What do you see beyond the IPO?
So we want to really, after those few years, increase our capacity and grow really like exponentially, I would say. I guess that's the word. So big ambition here.
Yeah, it's all it's lots of fun listing a company, let me tell you. I say
you've got experience.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of work to do, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
And look, we are starting to see purpose-based companies looking at listing as an option. And look, I think that's important if we want to grow the number of impact companies. We need to show investors that ultimately there's an attractive exit at some point.
Right.
That's it. That's a prerequisite. People need to have in mind that they can ultimately get a return on their investment. So I do wish you absolutely all the best with that listing. I hope it goes really well. We're coming to the end of our conversation, Fanny, and I just wonder if are there some things that people can do to support your journey or to find out more? Is there somewhere that interested investors can go to keep up to date on your IPO plans? Prospects that are interested in having a talk about the technology, where can people go?
Okay, the thing that works best, I would say, is contacting us directly to get the latest info and more details on our growth plans. We're also trying to release more news on our website, so you can tune in on that as well. And we'll work on making our LinkedIn also more active. That's a promise.
And the website is Ingine, ingine.co.kr.
Yes, and there's both a Korean version and an English version. So if you happen to find us on Google and follow the Korean version, don't panic. Just click on the EN on the top right, and you'll be just fine.
It's actually a really nice site, and it gives people an idea with some visuals about how the technology looks and works also. So yeah, I definitely encourage people to go along and have a look, because it is a little bit abstract when you're trying to describe what a wave energy converter looks like.
Without visuals.
It definitely helps with visuals, doesn't it? Okay, well, Fanny, thank you so much for this conversation this morning. I found it really interesting, and I wish you and the company all the best on your journey. We'll be watching closely.
Thank you, Nick. It was a nice chat.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Have a
Bye.
good day. Bye.